Picture this. You've got your popcorn ready, you're all settled in for a movie night, and suddenly your screen gets hijacked by a message from, get this, Captain Midnight.
Captain Midnight.
Yeah, protesting cable fees.
Sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Right. But this actually happened. April 27th, 1986, unsuspecting HBO viewers got a serious dose of unexpected programming.
Wow, 1986. That's going back a bit. Now, I got to ask, who was this Captain Midnight character and what was he trying to achieve?
Well, that's what we're diving into today. It might seem like a bizarre prank from a bygone era, but this incident wasn't just some forgotten TV trivia.
Oh, tell me more.
This thing had some real-world consequences, sparking changes in law and technology that are actually still relevant today.
Okay, now you've got my attention. So where do we start with a story this wild? We're talking like secret societies or something.
Yeah. Well, to understand the Captain Midnight incident, we got to go back to the early days of satellite TV. Imagine a time when television signals were like the Wild West, ripe for the taking if you knew how to wrangle them.
Hold on, you're saying people could just, like, pluck shows out of the air for free?
Pretty much. Back in the 70s and early 80s, if you were a tech enthusiast with a knack for electronics, you could build your own satellite dish and basically watch whatever you wanted, no monthly bill attached.
Whoa, that's kind of brilliant. I can see why people were hooked.
Yeah.
So where did things go wrong? Enter Captain Midnight.
Not quite yet. First, you had hotels, restaurants, even regular folks building these DIY setups, enjoying free premium channels. This is a golden age for early adopters, but
There's always a but, right?
yeah, you know it. The cable companies, they weren't exactly thrilled about this whole free-for-all. They saw an opportunity to, shall we say, monetize.
Ah, I see where this is going. So they slapped a fee on it, scrambled the signals, and suddenly those DIY dishes were about as useful as a chocolate teapot.
You got it. And that's where our friend Captain Midnight enters the picture. See, this scrambling, this encryption, it really ticked off a lot of people, especially those who felt like they were being denied access to something that used to be free.
I bet. I could see how that could spark some outrage. So who was this Captain Midnight, this crusader against cable fees? Some kind of Robin Hood of the airwaves?
His real name was John McDougal, and he wasn't some shadowy super hacker. He was a satellite dish dealer in Florida. When the scrambling started, his business, well, let's just say it took a hit.
Makes sense. His livelihood was directly affected by these changes.
Exactly. He saw this whole thing as a classic case of corporate greed. These companies, they were holding content hostage, and it frustrated him. He felt powerless, like he was fighting a losing battle against these big corporations.
And that's when he decides to take matters into his own hands.
You could say that. He decided to fight back, but not with petitions or protests. John McDougal, soon to be known as Captain Midnight, was about to wage his war using the very technology he knew so well.
So what did he, like, hack into HBO's mainframe or something? How does a satellite dish dealer even become Captain Midnight?
Well, McDougal knew his way around a satellite dish, that's for sure. But this wasn't exactly high-tech espionage. It was more, shall we say, audacious. See, a week before his big move, he decided to test the waters.
A test run? What, like a practice hijacking? Exactly. He briefly replaced HBO's signal with a test pattern.
Bold move. Did anybody even notice?
Apparently not. Or if they did, they didn't make a big fuss about it. And you want to know what's even more interesting?
Lay it on me.
That night, the movie HBO was showing. It was The Falcon and the Snowman. You know, the thriller about espionage.
Talk about irony. Okay, so test run, successful, albeit brief. McDougal's feeling pretty confident at this point, I imagine. So take us to that night, April 26th, 1986. What led up to Captain Midnight's primetime debut?
It was a Saturday night, and McDougal was working the late shift at the Central Florida Teleport. This was the place to be if you wanted to send signals up to satellites.
So he had access, but what made him decide to go for it that particular night?
Well, as the story goes, the other engineer clocked out, leaving McDougal alone at the station.
Surrounded by all that tech, just waiting for him.
Okay, I gotta know, how did he pull it off? Did he need, like, a secret code or something? Some kind of hacker lair with blinking lights and stuff?
You'd think so, right? But it was actually much simpler than that. McDougal, he just used his knowledge of the technology.
Keep going.
He took control of the station's massive 30-foot transmission dish. We're talking huge, aimed at Galaxy 1, the satellite that beamed HBO across the country. Then he typed out his message using, get this, a character generator, like the kind you'd use for subtitles on TV.
Okay, you're killing me. What did the message say? Was it some long, rambling manifesto about the evils of cable companies?
Not quite. It was actually pretty short and to the point. It flashed on screen, plain and simple. Good evening, HBO, from Captain Midnight, $12.95 month, no way. Showtime Movie Channel, beware. He even threw in a warning to the other premium channels. Talk about bold. So, what was HBO's reaction to all this? They must have been freaking out, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was chaos at HBO headquarters.
Mhm.
Imagine you're trying to watch a movie, and suddenly there's this message from some guy calling himself Captain Midnight, protesting cable fees. Technicians were scrambling, trying to figure out what was going on, how to shut it down. They tried to overpower McDougal's signal, cranked up their transmission power, but he was ready for them. It became this back and forth, this electronic tug of war playing out across the airwaves.
So, who won?
Well, after about 90 seconds or so, McDougal, he backed down. Maybe the gravity of what he was doing sunk in, but he shut it down, relinquished control of the signal, and went home.
Just like that, Captain Midnight rides off into the night. But I bet this wasn't the end of the story.
Oh, not even close. What McDougal didn't realize was that his little act of rebellion, this prank, it was about to have much bigger consequences than he could ever imagine.
So what happened next? Did the FBI storm McDougal's satellite lair?
Well, let's just say HBO wasn't about to let this slide.
I bet. They must have been fuming.
Oh, they were. This wasn't just about a disrupted movie night anymore. It was about their reputation, the security of their signal.
Right, if someone could hijack HBO, who's to say they couldn't target other broadcasters?
Exactly. And remember, this was 1986. The Cold War was still a thing. People were on edge.
So this wasn't just a prank anymore, it was a national security threat.
Well, it definitely got people thinking about the vulnerabilities of satellite communication. So, yeah, the FBI got involved, and they were determined to track down this mysterious Captain Midnight.
Did they have any leads? How do you even begin to investigate something like this?
They started with the basics, analyzed the technical details of the hijacking, narrowed down which uplink stations had the capability to pull it off. They even looked at the typeface used in Captain Midnight's message.
Wait, seriously, the typeface?
Yep. Turns out that typeface was unique to a specific model of character generator.
Wow, so they were able to narrow down the list of suspects that way.
Exactly. But what ultimately led them to McDougal was almost unbelievable.
Okay, now you have to tell me.
Remember how McDougal was bragging about the hijacking?
Yeah, at that payphone?
Well, turns out someone overheard him.
No way! Who? A secret agent?
An accountant, actually.
You can't make this stuff up.
He reported the conversation, even gave the FBI McDougal's license plate number.
Talk about bad luck. Busted by an accountant.
Right. So they arrested McDougal, charged him with what was, at the time, a misdemeanor.
A misdemeanor. For hijacking a satellite, that seems awfully lenient.
It does now, but back then there wasn't really a precedent for this kind of thing.
So what happened to Captain Midnight? Did he serve any time?
He pled guilty, got a $5,000 fine, and had his amateur radio license suspended for a year.
That's it. A slap on the wrist for causing a national incident.
Well, in a way, his punishment was almost beside the point. McDougal's actions had a much larger impact than he could have imagined.
How so?
Think about it. His hijacking, it exposed just how vulnerable satellite communication was.
Right. Anyone with enough know-how could just take over.
Exactly. And that's why this incident, as strange as it seems, actually led to some major changes.
Like what?
Well, first off, Congress passed the Electronic Communications Privacy Act in 1986, making satellite hijacking a felony.
No more slaps on the wrist?
Nope. And it didn't stop there. The incident also spurred the development of new technology to prevent future hijackings, like the Automatic Transmitter Identification System, or ATIS. It's basically a digital fingerprint for transmitters, making it much harder for unauthorized signals to interfere.
So Captain Midnight, the satellite vigilante, he actually ended up making things more secure.
Ironically, yes. His actions exposed vulnerabilities, sparked debate, and ultimately led to positive changes in the world of broadcasting.
It makes you wonder, though, was Captain Midnight a villain or a folk hero?
That's the big question, isn't it? And honestly, there's no easy answer. McDougal, he was just a guy who felt like he was being ignored, like the little guy was getting trampled by big corporations. Did he go about things the right way? Debatable. But one thing's for sure, the Captain Midnight incident is a reminder that even small acts can have unintended consequences, for better or for worse.
It really makes you think about the power of technology, the role of corporations, and how even a seemingly isolated act of rebellion can have ripple effects that shape the world around us. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the strange but surprisingly relevant case of Captain Midnight.